Hi everyone, welcome to the Finance Story Career Series. Where we speak to finance professionals to understand their career journey and get a perspective, on the various opportunities that's available. So way back in 2010, Karthik Reddy and Sanjay Nath founded Bloom Ventures, with a mission to reimagine startup financing for India. Over the years, Bloom has become a key player in India's startup ecosystem. So they provide pre-Series A, early stage funding for tech-focused and tech-enabled ventures. Today, I have with me a very interesting. Today we're going to have a very interesting conversation with Ankush. Okay, so Ankush is a chartered accountant, of course, and who is the financial controller at Bloom Ventures. He has a phenomenal career path. So, from spending almost 11 years in big names like Deloitte, EY, BMR, in their tax advisory and tax consulting teams, he's moved to Bloom Ventures in 2022 as a financial controller. So, today we will be speaking with Ankush to understand his journey, how and why he made the transition, and most importantly, what are the career opportunities for finance folks and especially chartered accountants in the VC and startup ecosystem. Ankush, thank you so much for joining in and making the time to speak with us.
Hi, Chantel. A very warm welcome to all the guests on the live session. I'm truly privileged, honestly, to be talking to you, and the fact that you have given me this opportunity to share my experience with the budding chartered accountants and those who are preparing to kind of enter this field. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, that's really kind of you. Thanks a lot, Ankush. So, Ankush, and everyone who's watching, thank you so much for joining in. If you have questions, as always, just type in your questions and we will address every single question. So, Ankush, my first question to you is, can you share a little bit about how did you start your career post CA? Why taxation? Why specialize in tax advisory and consulting? Can you go back a little and share?
Yeah, so I think I qualified in 2011 January, and thereafter I did my campus from the ICAI Delhi campus. And there were multiple companies who selected me as an interviewee candidate. At that point in time, I think transfer pricing, corporate tax, and international tax was kind of coming into its own as a tax practice field. And I thought, let's start with transfer pricing. And that's when I joined Ernst& Young Gurgaon office to kind of start off in transfer pricing, from where I moved on to the corporate tax part. So the idea was to do something which was kind of intellectually intriguing and intellectually appealing, and that's why I moved on to the tax field. Because at that point in time in India, the transfer pricing litigation was picking up. International tax was becoming more and more kind of an area which was yet to be deep dived into. So those were the two aspects which kind of attracted me towards tax advisory, and hence I joined this path, starting with EY actually.
Okay, that's amazing. So, did you do your articles as well into taxation?
No, my articleship was actually had two elements. One was purely the accounting and the audit part, and the second element was more on to deal with the commodity exchanges in India and the mutual fund distributorship and the mutual fund kind. So my principal had couple of aspects. So in the first part, I did audit and accounting, and the second part, I was more on the market side, where in fact I designed their first integrated KYC document, which included all the exchanges which one client would want to trade onto with the principal's office. So it was an interesting kind of an experience, not completely kind of a proper articleship, the standard one. At the same time, it had its own elements of some interesting stuff which I did there.
Okay, that's amazing. So now to our big question, right? So after 11 years in tax focused roles, with big names, EY, BMR, Deloitte, and complex transactions, right? After 11 years, why did you decide to move as a financial controller, with a VC firm? Why not take up, say, a CFO role or head the tax team of a large corporate, especially in today's world where international taxation, transfer pricing, these roles are in great demand, paid very well in India and globally. So,
Yeah, I think once you progress in your career and you are already 10, 11 years down the road and you are someone who is experienced, you would actually want to play to your strengths. And 50-60% of my experience, primarily in BMR and Deloitte, was to deal with private equity funds, fund setup, fund registration, solving transaction queries, participating on transactions, and also solving investor queries. Now, as a VC, as a venture India based early stage VC, I think Bloom has completed a certain part of its journey till the last year, till we raised our fund four, and then I think Bloom was building out its finance team with professionals outside, and I thought it's good to kind of play to your strengths and join a sunrise sector, and therefore I charted down this path where I wanted to kind of bring in my expertise on the table with Bloom founders and Bloom leadership. That was the thought process. Yeah, I completely agree that the other options available was to join as a tax head or to work as a CFO or to the reported to a CFO. That was also kind of attractive enough. But I think being a Marwadi and it being in my blood to deal in the markets and also to make investments and also look at the investments. So I thought, why not let's join a private platform. So those were the two aspects which played onto my mind. And when I met the Bloom leadership, I was quite happy to meet them, and I decided to move on with them.
Okay, that's amazing. Ankush, was it a conscious decision that you made, considering your career path, and with the kind of clients you were dealing with, or this opportunity came about and you said, hey, it makes sense, 1 plus 1 makes two.
Yeah, so my thought process was to try both aspects. So I was doing something on the fund side at the same time I was doing a lot of stuff on the international tax side also. So I had both the options, and then I thought, okay, let's kind of reach out to your network, reach out to your connects, and that's when I got introduced to Bloom Ventures. And since the leadership is something which interested me, the field interested me, I moved on. So that's how it played out for me.
Okay, so you consciously approached a profile in the VC firm, right?
Yeah, that's right to say, because given my expertise of last 10, 11 years, the finance function was the function where I should be starting with a VC, and that's what I kind of approached for.
Okay, that's interesting. So, I have this question. Okay, I was supposed to take it up later on, but I'll take it up now. There are a lot of other chartered accountants, be it at Big Fours or, be it from the industry, they want to be a part of a VC firm, like a big name like Bloom Ventures, right? So, what advice would you give them? How can they find such opportunities? Because opportunities of a CFO, financial controller, is not posted on LinkedIn. You don't really find them. So, how long did it take for you to find such a role, and what was your approach in connecting to the right people?
So I think the way one should start is to actually identify your strength and weaknesses. That is the first step I would advise anybody, whether to join a VC or not to join a VC. Second, I think, is to play to your strengths. Okay, don't really completely go into an uncharted territory, because then probably you would start as a fresher and you would not be really counted or kind of given the respect that you would want to command after 10, 11 years in the profession. The third I would say is that tap into your network. That is a very, very important aspect, because if you tap into your network, you are surely to come up with two, three names, four names who would connect you here and there, and you would probably be in a better position to interview, better position to talk to someone, rather than going completely as a stranger to someone to meet. So I think tapping your network is very important. So I got introduced to the Bloom leadership through a connect of mine in Bloom, and that's when my conversation started with the Bloom leadership. And after, I think, a lot of kind of discussions, understanding each party together, that's when we both decided to make the marriage happen. So that's how I think it worked for me.
Okay, can you elaborate on a little more as to how do you decide if a VC firm is good for you vis-a-vis it's not? How do you know? How if you
Very
can?
difficult, honestly. Honestly, very difficult. I tell you, one is the work part, and the other is the culture part. Uh, so at times, you may enjoy the work part, and then you may be a culture unfit for the organization, or the organization may be a culture unfit for you. So a perfect marriage is very difficult. But I think if somebody is looking to join a VC, they should identify what will be the skill set which they will bring to the table on a VC. Because while the glamorous part or the sexy part of VC is to make investments and to have exits, but there are various other platforms also on a VC which really make the investments happen and investments fructify. So I think one of those platforms is the finance platform, and that's where I think so one would need to identify the skill set which one has, or which one can kind of demonstrate when one would want to join a VC.
Okay. Ankush, great point. Okay, because we see a lot of at the finance story we get a lot of people saying like, hey, you know what? Can you connect me to someone? I want a chartered accountant will say, I want to connect to somebody in the investment team of a VC. Right? Everyone is lured towards the investment side because that looks very fancy on the outside. But as a CA, okay, what value do you bring in to the finance function? Is your role? I know it's very important, but what's the function exactly, and how important is the role? Do you interact with investors, with the startups, or is it like, hey, you know what, I'm just doing the finance stuff?
No, so there are plays around it. Okay, so different VCs are structured in a different manner, and the finance function, typically a finance function would have, right, starting from the accounting for the fund to the audits of the fund to the financial statements of the fund to all the regulatory compliances for the fund, managing all the registrations, managing all the cash flows. At the same time, if you look at on the investor side, I think the interactions would be on how we are reporting for the investors, their incomes and their taxes. Also, certain investors have very specific requirements because they may be a large institution, they may be a large sovereign fund, and they themselves will have multiple reporting obligations internally to their stakeholders and to their country. So I think working along with them and understanding their nuances of reporting and kind of bringing that to on table on the finance team is also a very important aspect. I think one key learning for me after joining as a finance controller and from a tax field was how important is cash flows. Probably this is something which one would never learn being not being in a finance function. I think cash flows is a very important function because that really tells a VC, okay, how much runway a particular fund has to invest or to reinvest. And without that, probably the investment leads would not really want to really go out and evaluate companies and size of investment they would want to make. So I think cash flows is a very key learning for myself. The other aspect is on the transaction tax and transaction compliances part, because whatever compliances or whatever transactions are happening, they need to be structured in a manner such that the the tax and the regulations both are taken care of and are married well together with the commercials. Similarly, when you structure a fund, when you are setting up a fund, I think again one has to marry the commercials along with the regulations and the tax bit to come out with a structure which is the optimal structure both for the the investment manager, for the investors, and ultimately for the investments. So there are a lot of aspects. I can go on talking about it and probably consume the entire session, but there are a lot of aspects, and I think one has to be geared up because as new fund jurisdictions come up, like the gift city, or one would have different kind of structures. It's very interesting. It's very interesting actually.
Okay. Any learning, unlearning that your current role required,
I think one biggest learning, as I told you, was the cash flow part. The second learning was that after having spent 11 years in a very regimented high performance roles, when you come to a VC, I think you would meet a different set of people altogether. People who come from different walks of life, different qualifications, different mannerisms. I think adaptability is a very important key. And so, therefore, the moment one is planning to change one's track, I think adaptability is a very important skill set. You cannot be like in a zone where you will say, okay, मैंने ऐसी सोचा और मैं ऐसी करूँगा. So that is something which is very important. Second thing is, I think, being open to feedback, because the moment you change your track, you need somebody to hold your hand and make you start walk on the track. And for that, you have to be open to feedback. Somebody is going to hold your hand, make you walk, And if you're not open to feedback, you will be probably nobody will take interest in you. And I think the third thing which I learned was, or probably I anyways kept on learning that fact, was to always kind of try and achieve a win-win situation, not only for yourself, for the organization, for your team, and for the other stakeholders. A win-win solution always works better than a win-lose and half win and a half lose situation. I think that was another learning for me here.
So from what are you telling me? It's more about a mindset shift that
Yes.
needed than the technical skills. So the technical skills were almost the same, and you'll have to adjust, play, and do stuff. But it was more on the mindset part.
Mindset was the first key part. The technical skill set is something which actually brought you on the table with the VC, right? And once you're on the table, you will have to anyways play with your skill sets, play with your mindset, and also keep on adding to it, because the process of learning should never stop, in my view. No matter what your age and what your position is, the process of learning, the process of being hungry, the process of being always being intellectually active and being open to evaluating various options while doing one particular thing. I think that is very important.
Okay. Ankush, I'll take this. Another pointer which I have is like, as I we have to elaborate a little bit on this. Okay. So as I said, a lot of CAs are now a part of many VC firms, right? But most of them are keen on the investment side, right? So my first question is, what are the skill set? What are the skill set that's needed to be on the investment side? Okay, and you've highlighted the skill sets for a finance function, and what are the skill sets that's needed for a finance function? Can you start from the investment side first? And Ankush, I'll add one more point. What are the
Yeah.
various roles? What are the various roles in a VC firm? If you could just break that down for us. We only know finance and investment. What are the other roles that a VC has?
Yeah, see, so if I tell you, I think initially when private equity and when VC firms really started operating in India, the one thing probably which people would focus is to how to make an investment and how to kind of have a good exit. But I think now the approach has changed for the better. The fact is that you not only meet a founder and you not only invest in the founder, what you really invest is in the person and in the idea, and to make the idea work together with the founder. And for that, various private equity or VC players, what they're having are different platforms within the VC firm. So, for example, one important platform which really works is the market networks platform. So, for example, if we have, say, for example, say a 10, any VC, for example, has a 10 portfolio company kind of a situation, and where you can actually help the company, each of your portfolio meet each other, connect them to the right markets, connect them to the right bankers, connect them to the right other VC or other important large investors within your fraternity. That really helps those portfolio companies to really blossom. So this is something which is not really an investment role or a finance role, but this is like a market network role, which I think a lot of VCs are now doing in the market. The second role, which I think is important, or second aspect, which I probably learned while when I came here, was the growth markets platform. So once a particular portfolio company reaches a particular size or a particular scale, now, if the idea has a potential to really become very big, what is it required to guide the founder and the business to reach their potential? And therefore you need people in the VC firm who has that business expertise or the domain expertise to help those portfolio companies really blossom in their particular areas of operation. So apart from investments and finance, I would say the growth platform and the market networks are pretty very very important. The third, I think, is the community platform. The community platform actually creates a lot of kind of synchronization, a lot of brings a lot of people together in terms of right from, say, a banker or a marketing firm with the founders, meet them, talk to them, guide them, and form collaborations so that ultimately these startups really grow to what they need to. So I think community platform is something which Bloom has focused, given a lot of focus on, because we have a very healthy platform where we actually get people, get promising founders to come on table, guide them, work with them in their startup journey. We may or may not really end up investing in them, but it's always good to be really connected with such founders, because opportunities can come at any moment in time.
Okay. And what are the specific skill sets, like when you're looking at, say, someone for the investment team? What are the skills that's needed? Okay. And
Yeah.
since we're talking from the CA perspective, since most of the people in our community are chartered accountants, what is the gap do you feel, CAs need to fill in, to be desirable for those roles, if I may put it that way?
Yeah, so I think, see, investments, I would say now what's happening in the industry, right, in the is that people who are required in a particular investment role, they would not come in as a generic investment professional. What they would come in is that, okay, if somebody comes in from, even if being a CA, for example, I have worked in a strategy role, for example, with say an ITC, or I would have worked, say, with a Procter and Gamble. So I understand the business part of it, the entire distribution network part of it. So probably I might become a very good fit for a venture capital or a private equity fund which is looking to invest in consumer businesses. So, along with CA, or along with having any other financial degree, what I think now VC firms are looking for is domain or sector expertise, and primarily the business expertise part of it, because that's when the combination becomes really lethal, and you can really add value to the investment team while evaluating multiple opportunities. And you can really connect the dots, identify which founder would have the skill set, is he really approaching the right problem in the right manner to solve it, because you have the sector or the domain expertise. So somebody whom we are looking to hire, for example, maybe in a SaaS platform of the investment vertical, it would we would really want to have someone who has probably worked in that domain or has the expertise to understand that domain. So if I come to the second part of your question, a CA degree or a CA certification, what really helps you is to understand the finance, the audit, the tax part of any business, for example. And therefore, that person may become indispensable may become industry agnostic completely. But the moment you join, for example, if as a CA I'm joining EdTech platform in their FP&A vertical, and I am also working along with the business finance team and the strategy team, then I have the business skill set of an edtech also. Then probably I might become a real asset in the investment team of a VC which is focusing on edtech startups. So that's where I think probably the gap could be, that if I were to be desired for an investment role as a CA, I would need to add some sort of business expertise, domain expertise to it, so that my understanding of the books, of the numbers, as well as the business becomes a lethal kind of a combination to evaluate any proposition for investment.
Okay, okay, well answered. Cool. We'll take some questions as well, but before that, I have this question for you. Okay, at Bloom, recently I saw a post where you're hiring for industrial trainees. So, would you want to talk a little bit about that? What are you guys hiring for, and is it only industrial trainees or also freshers, and at what levels?
No, so in terms of trainees, Bloom hires trainees across various platforms. From the finance platform perspective, we were looking for industrial trainees, because I think we are the only VC in India which is actually offering a CA aspirant to have an industrial training role with a VC, so that that person can actually start looking at how VC operates. From a role definition perspective, I think that person would work on everything. If he joins as a trainee, he would rightly work from an accounting to the audit to the financial statements to all regulatory and tax reportings, investor reportings. And if that person is kind of committed and willing enough, he may really work on certain other interesting stuff also, which the finance team does.
Okay, okay. So, how do you apply? I mean, you go to the Bloom website and
No, so I and Mithul, my head of finance, we keep on putting LinkedIn posts with our email IDs, so they can keep on applying. They can probably search me or Mithul on our LinkedIn handles, and can apply on just send their resumes on their email ID. We find them interesting, we call them for an interview. As simple as that. No, nothing, no more filters actually there.
That's amazing. So, everyone watching, if you want to intern with Bloom Ventures, great guys in the finance team, please write to them. Okay, so I have this question from Arti. Let's take questions. Who says, how is the scope of a CA in a VC finance moving into a VC investment team? What's the scope?
Yeah, the scope, I would say, as I said, the business or the domain expertise is very important, because shifting or doing anything without any value addition may not really happen. And it's not practical also, to be very honest, because as I have seen multiple private equity and multiple VC funds, the way the investment teams really operate is that they really have domain or sector expertise. Maybe, say for example, on the supply chain side, maybe on the marketing side, maybe on the specific business side, for example a SaaS or a fintech or an agri-tech, whatever you call it. So I think that is very important. That would really make the set the case up for the movement from VC finance to VC investment team.
Okay, so you mean to say it's a difficult move, but it's not impossible. If
It's not impossible at all. If I can give you examples within Bloom itself. So my kind of my partner in Bloom, Ashish Fafadia, he's himself a CA. But he is involved in multiple functions in Bloom. He is into fintech, he is into fundraise side. So it all depends in terms of how you really apply yourself, what you work for, how you strive towards it. While this might seem to be a very generic answer, but as I said, the industry has evolved now. It's not a hustler industry anymore, where people can from any walk of life can get into the investment team. To be very honest, one has to really build up the case for it and work towards it. I am not saying it's impossible, because there are other chartered accountants who probably got into the business side of it first. And then once they believe that, okay, they have the expertise, they have now become investment professionals because they now invest in the particular sector in which they had the experience in. So I think sector knowledge and domain expertise are very, very important to really make the move really worthwhile from an investment team perspective.
and does an MBA help?
The MBA, I think, helps in the fact that probably their ability to look at a business and their ability to read a business is maybe better than a CA, I believe. Given the way they are trained, or they undergo training and the kind of practical aspects they undergo, they may be an easier fit to move from a VC finance to a VC investment team. Having said that, I think many people really start off in the transactions team in a particular kind of a sector in a P or a VC, and then they probably build out their expertise.
Okay. Okay. Aarti, I hope we answered your question. If you have a follow-up question, please do add on. We have this question from Shant. He says, what are the various options in a VC or a startup environment for someone with expertise in income tax litigation field? And how can we leverage transferable skills acquired in income tax litigation field?
Yeah. So I think so VC may not be really large enough for anyone to absorb anyone who is coming from an income tax litigation practice. I think large private equity funds, they have very big finance and tax teams, because they have multiple funds, multiple cases with, say, the tax office, right, from direct or indirect, or from a SEZ perspective. And therefore, the need for a full-time income tax litigation role could arise in very large funds. But I don't see such a role arising in a VC fund, I believe.
Okay.
Also, in case of startups, I just to complete that lame part of it. For example, a startup. So, for example, those startups which are mature startups, okay, and for example, somebody who has a pan-India presence, they may need somebody to help them on their GST, on their income tax, circle-wise presence to be managed very well. So there could also be a need in kind of mature startups who are like in their Series E, F, G round of funding, who are large enough and who are building a team for the from a tax litigation perspective.
Okay, Shant, I hope it has answered your question. Okay, Ankush, what is the size of your finance team right now? If you're okay to share.
I think we have five full-time professionals, and then we keep on working with industrial trainees. That's the way we are structured right now.
Okay. Okay. The next question is from Vikram, who says, "What are the options in a VC for sector research analyst or credit analyst working in banks?"
I think sector research analyst and credit analyst, I'm not very sure, unless and until it's purely a fund or a VC who is looking to invest largely in, say, the financial services sector, there may be a need. But for a sectoral research analyst, depending on the sector you are having research expertise in, for example, if somebody is doing on the automotive sector, okay, and somebody who has expertise to evaluate EV transformation of India and how big large companies are doing that, probably that person may become relevant for VC, which is focusing on EV investments, because EV is finally, or it's happening in India, and there are multiple aspects attached to the EV industry. So I think a sector research would work that way. So anybody who's doing all sector research may be like a jack of all trades, master of none. But I think anybody who is deeply focused on a particular sector research should approach those VCs which have a mandate to make such investments.
Okay. Vikram, I hope it answers your question. The next one is from Charu. It's like her question is how much does the CFA qualification helps in getting into VC firms?
No, I think CFA, the way CFA is structured and the way uh, being a CFA brings to table is to ability to read the returns on investments better, the ability to decipher the numbers of the portfolio companies better. That is where the CFA's ability to interpret financial numbers into how they are going to be read into the performance of the particular fund or a particular portfolio company. That's where I think CFA really comes into the picture. I think if somebody is a CFA and has an experience in the fintech world, that's a perfect mix for approaching a VC's investment team to be a player in the fintech vertical of that VC. So CFA definitely helps, no doubt about it.
Okay. The next question is from Sagar. Okay. Sagar's question is how a product controller can utilize his experience into the VC environment and from the organization from in which vertical it can add on the best. So I guess the first
So
one.
if somebody is a product controller, I'm not very sure what the role
Yeah.
exactly would look like.
Yeah.
But as I said, if somebody is on uh, when you say a product controller, is the person really dealing on the sales side part of it, or probably on the design part of it, depending on that. Uh, this would become pretty niche actually, very, very niche. It depends on the sector in which you are a product controller, and but definitely the sector would actually dictate the vertical in which you can join. It may not be a single pan vertical presence in the VC, but depending on the sector in which you are a product controller, Sagar will help uh, for you to approach the relevant VC for a role.
Okay. Sagar, if you want to elaborate a little more and clarify what does a product controller mean, please mention in your next comment. We can take it up. Cool. Ankush, what is your day like? How is your day planned into?
So day begins maybe at 6:37 and it goes on till whenever you can last. So I think the ideal day would be probably to come to office, start on your WhatsApp group chats with the team, with the advisors, keeping the ball rolling around. And I think one thing which is for sure for all professionals is that whatever you plan, you may something really different happens on that day with you. That's the way the days are. I think mm, the more and more interaction driven day, with all the team members, all the stakeholders, taking the mandate forward. That's how it is.
Okay. Can you elaborate, Ankush? I know we've touched upon this question earlier, but can you elaborate exactly? Okay, what are the opportunities and learnings, and what exactly goes on in the finance team? If you have to break down and give a bird's eye view to someone who wants to be a part of the finance team, because we're actually hiring for a couple of roles in some very good VC firms, but we're not able to find the right candidate. And if we find a smart, right, amazing candidate, street smart, who understands everything, they want to be a part of the investment team. They're like, hey, I don't want to be a part of the finance team, right? So, can you give us a bird's eye view? Because when we were last talking, we're like, hey, you know what? The role of a finance guy is so important. We interact with everyone. We're not just another finance person, right? We're not an accountant. You guys are finance people. So, can you really elaborate on this aspect? It will help so many.
Yeah, see, I think right from the conceptualization of a fund, okay, what is going to be the fund's corpus? What is going to be the fund's life? What is going to be, where is the fund going to be set up? How the fund structure would be designed, whether it will be an LLP, whether it will be a trust, whether what will be the commercials between the LPs and the GPs and the fund. How do you really want to? So that's the first part of it, the fund structuring part of it. Okay, and then one step ahead, when you are approaching to finalize the fund structure, you really move on to the fund registration part, which is registering the fund with the relevant regulator. Once the entire application is drafted, it's filed. Thereafter, once the fund is set up, you really start onboarding investors. There are multiple queries which may come at the time of onboarding itself, right from a KYC, right from the kind of certifications that the investors are required to provide, uh, the class of unit, the currency in which the investor would put in the money. All these things need to be decided and agreed. Right. So one is this part. The other part is actually dealing once the fund is live. What happens next? Okay. So what happens is that you have to deal with the entire, first of all, the cash flows part of it. This investors start putting money, and the clock of IRA starts ticking right then. Okay. So how nimble is the organization to deploy the funds in the right investments, and how quickly we can do that? Um, Once the fund starts progressing on that part, the funds achieve its final close, then you would have to need to settle down the fund with the right accounting practices, right reporting practices, what sort of disclosures are going in your financials of the fund, what valuation standards we are adopting. One aspect which I didn't touch earlier is the valuation aspect, which is becoming very, very critical now with kind of all the regulators' lens being on the valuation part, because valuation is pretty subjective, and it is something which gets talked about a lot everywhere. So valuation is something which we would, as the finance team, would have to lead that with the valuers, also with the getting the data from the portfolio companies, the MIS part, analyzing the same, and getting that value from the valuers. I think once you keep on completing annual cycles of valuation, you will also have certain situations where investors would want to exit the fund. And how do you really kind of accept an exit of an investor, or there's a movement of the units happening that is there. At the same time, as the fund approaches its end of life cycle, the exits, managing the exits, and also managing the entire fund wind down and the distributions to investor is a very, very interesting aspect of the finance team has to deal with. So I think a lot of things, probably people only look at the part which gets reported in the business dailies, which is the investments part. Probably they are not aware, or they are not made aware of what's going on in the finance team. And not to forget the fact that there are also multiple, as I said, the investor reportings which we have to do when we kind of onboard investors. Now I think the other aspect which is becoming very important is, for example, the ESG part of the investments. Now, what is the ESG policy of the fund? What are kind of how our portfolio investments are complying with the ESG policy? That is also something which is coming up, and it is becoming going to become very, very important in the days to come, given the kind of climate commitments which all nations have signed up for. This is a very, very important aspect.
Okay. That's interesting. So your role, of course, involves a lot of financial aspects, valuation, everything. But it's also a role where there's a lot of client interaction, a lot of interaction with other people. You have to convey matters very clearly. So communication also plays a very key role in what you're doing. Okay.
Yes, very, very important. You may or may not really have a very deep understanding of the technical part of it, but if you do not know how to articulate what you want to say, and then there is a serious gap, because communication skill set is something which is very, very important, right from the way you interact internally with your stakeholders, the way you interact externally with your advisors, with the regulators. It is very important that your communication skill set is top notch.
Okay. So CAs watching this, they should really focus on improving their, communication skills, speaking better, because that really gives you an edge, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that is something which can really make you stand out in the crowd. If you have somebody who has very good spoken and written English, I think that really makes you stand out. And not only English, I think any language for that matter. If you are a good speaker, you are someone who knows how to put across your thoughts very clearly in clear terms. And that really helps to kind of build you anywhere in any organization.
True that. So we've spoken about all the good things, okay? Challenges in your journey, like in your current role, what are the challenges where you feel like, oh my God, what's happening? Are they like
I think
extreme ups and
one
downs?
Yeah, I think one clear challenge is to keep pace with the changing world. Okay. Every morning you get up and you read something about Chat GPT. Now, what is this and what's happening around? Okay. Every morning you get up and you read something about, okay, this fund has done this exit and this fund has done this. Okay, what Bloom can do better in that? So I think one clear challenge and an opportunity, I would say, is to keep pace with. Okay. And at times you may set the benchmark, and at times you may want to follow somebody else's benchmark. But keeping pace and keeping yourself relevant is a very clear challenge. At the same time, as I say challenge, it's an opportunity, because anybody who conquers that challenge would actually be the front runner. So one has to be relevant, one has to keep abreast of what's happening around, and be innovative. Okay. Uh, Doing what everybody is doing is very easy, but doing something which everybody is not doing and still winning, winning out of it is something which one should strive for.
True. So I'll just ask you another question. How do you stay relevant? Of course, apart from watching news and talking to your team members, what do you do to stay relevant? Do you do a lot of research, read a lot of stuff? You dedicate a certain part of your day to only meeting people, reading stuff. How does it work?
So I think one thing is that what's happening around you within the organization or outside the organization. One thing to be keeping, as you said, reading is must, but it is harder than what you are actually saying. Keeping reading everything you want to read is very difficult, so you will need to have a very focused approach. One is reading about your domain expertise, one is reading about the business part of it, and one is reading about what's happening around you as a country, as a world. So one would have to be smart enough, start the process of reading at least at some point, and then as you progress reading, you grow into the reading phase. You understand, okay, this is something which I do not really need to read. This is something which I must be reading. Okay. And also be open to what's happening around, because now I think probably is the age of podcasts. So instead of people reading stuff, people would prefer to listen to a podcast while traveling back home or while traveling to office. That is something which I do myself. And lot of other interesting thing is that lot of VCs, lot of big organizations, or say your the institutes or the sector knowledge, they have their newsletters coming. Okay. So for example, the big VCs, something like a Y Combinator or a Andreessen Horowitz, they have their own newsletters. The General Catalyst has a newsletter. Bloom has its own newsletter. So I think reading a newsletter really helps you to, okay, understand, okay, this is happening in the world. And then probably once you start reading, you will anyway start your own path in terms of what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. But keeping pace is important. something which is there happening for say 10 days and then it doesn't really pass on to your eyes and the world has moved ahead, it puts you in a bit of a tight situation.
True. Any podcast that you recommend which we should be listening to?
I think the Bloom podcast,
Okay.
the Bloom podcast on Spotify, X Unicorns, is a fantastic series. I think my personal favorite is the Manish Taneja's Purple. What happens is that when you listen to a podcast, you're listening to a person's whole journey and a experience set of, okay, which you might yourself might not really end up having yourself. So a lot of book recommendations which these founders share are really very interesting because a book probably can just change your life completely. So I think this Bloom X Unicorns is a wonderful podcast series. I think there is a podcast series which Shantanu runs on the barber shop, something of that sort.
Yep.
That is also very interesting. The third thing which I found interesting was Mr. Kamat's podcast with a lot of business people, different sectors, what's happening, not happening around. Those are interesting podcasts. On the I think on there's another podcast. I'm forgetting the name right now, but there is a podcast series which is run outside India by a lot of. I'm forgetting the name. I would probably share it with you separately, but
Okay.
that is also very interesting.
Okay, and I will add the name in the comment section, and we'll summarize the podcast to be watched, and folks can then catch up on this. Sagar has come back with a point saying that product controller is basically concerned with compiling P&L balance sheets from products traded by the front office on a daily basis.
I think Sagar, what you should be really looking for is that with this skill set, what you should be really looking for is not the VC environment, but how can you grow in a right company fit into a larger role? Say, product controller may be the one level of role, and how you really expand your role in that particular field. Because I don't really see a role for a product controller in a VC environment. Maybe you should really find out the right sort of blend in terms of sector in which you would want to grow your role from product controller to say a brand level manager of the entire brand. That is what you should aspire for, provided obviously you're interested in that field to grow into.
Okay, Ankush, a lot of people cannot get into the world of VCs. It's a small market, especially
Yeah,
finance CAs. It's a small team, right?
small team,
So
yes.
what else could they aim for? So should they look at startups, early stage startups, or unicorn startups, or those just growing? What is your perspective? Wherein the ROI will be most for them?
No, I think I would go to the principle of three idiots, to be very honest. I think don't chase the ROI, chase your interest. ROI बन जाएगा, ऑनेस्टली बन जाएगा, अपने आप बन जाएगा, कुछ करना ही नहीं पड़ेगा. अगर आप if you are playing to your strengths and you are playing to what you really enjoy, okay, and you are playing to what you aspire to become, the ROI would automatically follow that. It has to. If today Sachin or Lataji would have said that no, I want to be Amitabh Bachchan, they would have never been Amitabh Bachchan because Amitabh Bachchan has his own skill sets, the baritone, the height, the action, which Sachin would never have, Lataji would never have. So they have their own skills. I think one is very important to find what are you as a human being, what are your skill sets, what you really aspire to become and work towards it instead of doing it reverse way. Okay, यहाँ पे ROI ज़्यादा तो मैं ये कर लेता हूँ. I think it doesn't work. Probably it may not be really so such a happy experience if you go down that path. That would be my advice to all the budding chartered accountants, all the budding professionals. That identify what you really enjoy doing. If you really enjoy doing something, continue to do that and build an ROI around that instead of following something which already has a very big ROI.
Well said. True that. So, in short, if you look at stuff where you can really add value, where you're really passionate about, not just chase a
Yes.
VC has a lot of money, go for it. Choose accordingly. Choose
To be very
accordingly.
honest, I think VC needs a lot of commitment, lot of hard work, and you never know what's the world going to be 10 years down the line. If you are playing a bet today, if it doesn't really turn out the way you expect that to turn out, you may not be able to raise your next fund also. So it is a high risk, high reward business. So I would say I think chase what you really are made for. I think it's one thing which I keep on debating with my friends, with my family, is that how do you really find out what you are made for? Okay, and one thing which commonly crops up as an answer is आपको क्या करने में मजा आता है? What you do really enjoy? Do that.
Wow, true that. True. Cool. So I'll ask you one last question. Okay. For those who want to be a part of startups, say as a CFO, financial controller, you know, how do they choose the startups? How do they choose the startups? Okay. And when you are you interact with a lot of CFOs of startups, finance guys of startups. Okay. So, or when you're hiring for their teams, right? You guys must be playing a key role. What do you look for in the CFO, finance team? What do you look for? So I have two questions.
Yeah, got it. So I think, see, at different stages of a company's journey, the appetite to hire, it changes. It is not the same anytime. So, for example, somebody who is just completely bootstrapped, अभी just start ही किया है startup, they may not really hire anyone. Or maybe a one finance person who would do end to end everything. Okay. As you grow your operations, you look for domain expertise. Somebody who has an expertise in tax, somebody who has an expertise on the audit and the books part, and the financial statements part, somebody who has an expertise on the business finance part, on the treasury part, somebody who has an expertise, for example, on the FP&A part. So then you would choose, okay, somebody, so anybody who is hiring would want to hire, okay, a person who already has the experience, okay, and somebody who is very hungry to make good. So anybody who is looking for a role in these startups as a CA, I think one should look for roles which are matching with their kind of existing profiles, and then grow into it and reach a certain level. And somebody who is a CA fresher, I think for them to join a startup at so early in their career really may not really make sense. They should join a place which would help them hone their skills and become very superior professionals. Then once at a certain level in your career, I think then you should really jump the bandwagon. For example, my own brother, he was actually working with a listed company. Then he moved to an edtech in Bangalore, edtech startup. So he was able to see the world completely in a full circle because he was a stat audit professional with EY. Then he moved to a listed player. Then he moved to an tech player in Bangalore. So he has seen all the three worlds. I think that is the way one should really structure their career.
Okay, cool. So Ankush, any closing message, to those watching, maybe finance folks with 5 to 6 years of experience, or even freshers, what would you tell them?
I think uh, three, 4 points which comes to my mind, which I personally follow and I personally discuss with my family and with my kind of fraternity. One thing is that uh, there is no second option to hard work. Please do not think that okay, हो गया अभी लाइफ है अभी जी लेते हैं. These are like popular terms which you will hear with youngsters. अभी नहीं करोगे तो कब करोगे. Similarly, I would say that अभी मेहनत नहीं करोगे तो कब करोगे, because you would miss the bus. Somebody else would do what you are not doing. Then what happens? The second thing, I think, one very important aspect as a professional is your communication skill set. That has to be top notch, and one should read and read a lot. I think I thank my father a lot for the fact that he really introduced me to hardcore editorial reading of newspapers when I was in class 8. That really played a big role, and I thank him a lot for that. I have not acknowledged it in front of him. Probably when he sees it, he will be happy listening to it. I think he introduced me to that hardcore reading, which really shaped me as a person and as a professional. The third thing, as I said, is probably adaptability. The world is changing very fast, and every day, be it the tech side, be it your home, be it your city, your locality, everything is changing. If you're not adaptable and you're not ready to run the ball as it comes, it will be very difficult for you to survive. So be ready to adapt. I think the next thing on my target list is to understand how to use Chat GPT for my benefit, for the finance team's benefit. That is something which is there on the radar. So I think these three skill set will really help people to really grow and to become what they really want to become.
Well said. I'm taking this. Amazing pointers. We have this last question from Sanjay. He says, "What about retired CAs? Like, what opportunities do you find for them? Startups, VCs, fintech."
No, I think one thing which one of our Bloom affiliates did, Metamorph, which helps to startups to hire people, train them, is that we actually came out with a profile for retired or senior army professionals, because the kind of discipline, the kind of hard work, the kind of ethos they bring to table is exemplary and second to none. Similarly, I think those who are retired CAs, the entire journey, right from a bank entry to a journal entry to a financial statement to a filing with the regulator, is something which they would know the best, and they would not have your WhatsApp compulsions like the youngsters have. So they should be very happy to really apply anywhere, start their work. I think there's a very famous movie I saw. I think it's a uh,
It's an
Anna
English movie.
Hathaway English
Intern.
movie, the
Intern.
Intern. Yeah,
The intern.
fantastic movie. I was like blown away, man. This is like amazing. I think that is something which every startup founder should be watching, and they should be really willing to hire people who might be senior people, but they come with loads of experience, and they can really help you keep grounded. Because when you have lofty valuations coming into your kind of, you may not be really the founder that you were really started with.
Ankush, you guys should take the lead in this because we get a
I will
lot of
propose this. I
we
will
have a lot
propose
of
this
senior
to
partners
my
who have
affiliate.
retired, and they always ask us this question: "Hey, do you know any startup where I can add value?" Because they've got a huge experience, they are used to that hectic work life, and suddenly, there's no place where you
It's all
can,
gone.
yeah. So and they're amazing, amazing guys. So yeah, so Sanjay, great question, and I'm sure Ankush will look into this and the Bloom team.